Chapter 881, A Play. The Rose School of Thought demigod, who was hiding in the shadows, wore a hooded black robe and a golden mask with red and black patterns smeared across it. His figure couldn't be made out, but he was definitely not short, standing at a height of 1.8 meters. He used the Marauder Pathways sealed artifact to steal Tutenses Ii's sarcophagus, placing it before him. Immediately, his body phased away and drew out an extended form as though he had turned into a thick, long, and soft rope. This transparent and nearly ethereal rope quickly bound the heavy sarcophagus in a bid to bring it into the spirit world. At this moment, a strong gust of wind sounded in the Rose School of Thought demigod's ears. They clashed in the air, forming an explosive-like stir. Boom! Tutenses Ii's golden sarcophagus was sent flying as the transparent rope around it unfurled, shrinking back into a humanoid form. This Rose School of Thought demigod floated diagonally downwards in an uncontrollable manner before turning into a wraith, no, an evil spirit's form. He allowed the intense winds to blow through his body without making any additional movements. He saw eddies in the air swirl up rapidly as an unrestrained hurricane suddenly appeared, sweeping up the rocks, gravel, trash, and parts of the harbor's roof into the air. Even the carriage, which had been autonomously moving before, flew up because of its proximity. It was torn into pieces amidst the strong winds. Seemingly lucky, but in fact an expected outcome, the shadows where the Rose School of Thought demigod was hiding didn't have any lone soldiers and was far from the main path. The lady in the black evening gown and crown of thorns was obstructed by the hurricane as her body involuntarily wavered backward. She was unable to immediately rush to the golden sarcophagus that had been thrown up into the air, and she could only use her momentum to turn her body sideways, casting her gaze to a warehouse that stood far away outside the dock district. Immediately after that, she turned her head to look at the Rose School of Thought demigod because he wasn't affected by the hurricane. Confinement. The lady, who was also wearing a golden mask, raised her left hand and grabbed at her enemy's figure within her sights. The Rose School of Thought demigod had formidable spiritual intuition. As he sensed the danger with the help of his spiritual intuition, he did a mirror blink ahead of time, leaping onto a piece of glass about 80 meters away. At this moment, the hurricane seemed to stabilize itself and rapidly calmed down. Pa. The items that had been swept up fell to the ground, including the golden sarcophagus that contained Tutenses Ii. Bang! It slammed open a crater as it completely broke apart after suffering the wrath of the hurricane. The lid at the top flew up, scattering the gold and gems that were sealed in the top 2 layers of the sarcophagus as burial items. Then, the lower level of the sarcophagus tumbled a few times, dropping golden boxes and jade containers that stored the desiccated organs. A corpse that was bound in yellowish-brown cloth tumbled out. Its surface was covered in a dark red, oily liquid. This was none other than the mummy created after Tutenses Ii passed away. It was extremely thin, and its face had a golden mask with patterns covering it, just like the mask worn by the demigod from the Rose School of Thought. Embedded in its eye sockets were 2 abnormally pure onyx gems. The moment the mummy appeared, the surroundings seemed to dim. The sarcophagus's main body stopped as dark red liquid flowed out of it, soaking the nearby soil. When the Rose School of Thought demigod with the Marauder Pathways sealed artifact saw this scene, he was first enraged before he thought of something. The look in his eyes turned into pleasant surprise. His figure vanished from the glass fragment, phasing into the 2 onyx eyeballs of Tutenses Ii. Then, he possessed the mummy and attempted to pull it into the spirit world. Suddenly, he sensed that the mummy and his evil spirit vision had vanished. Simultaneously, the Tutenses Ii mummy with a slanted golden crown on its head suddenly bounced up, turning its onyx-embedded face towards the only lighthouse in Pritz Harbor. This pharaoh, which had been dead for centuries, produced an inhuman cry from its throat. Bound with yellowish-brown bandages, it freed its shriveled leg, strode, and ran off. It seemed to be running towards freedom, but it had forgotten one thing. It was just a corpse. It should be lying down in silence. Tab. The Tutenses Ai Mummy finished accelerating just as it began. Upon seeing this, the lady with the crown of thorns raised her right palm and aimed at the mutated mummy. "All the dead will receive their eternal peace," she said a few words in ancient Hermes. Bang! The Tutanses Ai mummy exerted strength in its legs as it leaped up, jumping into another direction, escaping the region that would make it enjoy its eternal rest, doing so in a way that didn't adhere to a zombie's agility. Further away, the black-haired, golden-eyed man, who was pursuing Mamosi, narrowed his eyes as his ring once again emitted a crystalline beam of light. His figure teleported in front of the mummy as he attempted to stop the deceased from moving away. However, Tutanses Ai changed directions once again, charging out from a different angle. It kept changing its direction, as though its goal was to approach the lighthouse by following an irregular route. Mamosi's heart stirred as his body suddenly vanished, flashing onto a piece of glass not far from the mummy. He used this as a springboard, and finally appeared in the two onyx in Tutanses Ai's eye sockets. Although the lone military's demigod had restricted possession, the Highlands Kingdom's pharaoh was no ordinary item. It had some spirituality remaining. Seeing his partner succeed, the demigod with the Marauder Pathway sealed artifact didn't hesitate to extend his black-gloved left hand, aimed it at the lady in the evening gown, and gripped his hand into a fist before turning it half a circle. The lady immediately felt her thoughts go adrift for a second. Following that, she was bound tightly by her own gown. Almost at the same time, the lone soldier far away on the warehouse rooftops found it difficult to control their rifles as they aimed in her direction and pulled their triggers. Bam, bam, bam. The steel monsters with thick cannons also unleashed their cannonballs at the lady. The golden-eyed demigod didn't attempt to save his partner. Instead, he looked at Tutanses Ai's mummy, which had come to a stop because of Mamosi's possession. He gripped his right hand into a fist and waved it abruptly. Execution. A look of joy flashed past his eyes because it didn't matter if the mummy died again, but Mamosi couldn't afford that. Elsewhere, just as the bullets and cannonballs were to hit the lady, they suddenly slowed down as though they had sunken into a quagmire formed of air. They were repelled by a power that stemmed from laws. On the lady's head, the crown of thorns lit up suddenly, using up more than half of the accumulated ocean of light. The hooded Rose School of Thought demigod immediately discovered this as he vanished from a location far away from it, as though he was fundamentally wiped away. This also meant that he had arrived in front of the lady and saw her raise her right hand. Gathered within her right hand was pure condensed light. They transformed into a blazing spear that had two pure white wings sweep out at its tip, enveloping the spearhead like an angel's embrace. The Rose School of Thought demigod's eyes widened immediately as he heard the footsteps of death. He attempted to use Mirror Blink to leap away, but he found that his surroundings were sealed by the pure white wings. An intense sense of fear surged within him and inundated his reason, making him abandon his resistance towards his roots to his being and strength. At this moment, a shrieking wail sounded as the lady's eyes temporarily turned turbid. The blazing spear in her right hand deviated to the side as she failed to maintain its stability. It collapsed into a gorgeous blast of light as it was swept up in the air like a hurricane. And in the vicinity of the Tutanses Ai mummy, Mamosi had stopped his possession. Beside him, a dirty doll fell to the ground. The doll's chest had a tear that nearly penetrated it. It stood up and its eyeless face seemed to come to life, turning abnormally warped and gruesome. It continuously wailed with a shrieking tone, causing the nearby lone golden-eyed demigod to feel an invisible hand grabbing at his neck as he kicked and struggled in midair. It was because of this doll's existence that Mamosi was executed. Likewise, the other Rose School of Thought demigod wasn't struck by the blazing spear. When the latter saw this, he immediately used Mirror Blink to approach the Tutanses Ai mummy that was still focused on moving in the direction of the lighthouse. He planned on using this opportunity to join forces with Mamosi to achieve the goal of their operation. At this moment, the lady in the evening gown erased the distance, appearing directly above them. The crown of thorns on her head emitted the purest of light. She pressed down with her right hand and said, "This place will have the mysterious weakened and the real strengthened." Just as she said that, the blood-stained doll immediately lost its expression and stopped shrieking. The golden-eyed demigod from the lone military finally had a chance to catch a breather. He forcefully pulled away the hexed hand that was grappling his throat. From that moment, their demigod powers rapidly declined as attacks that stemmed from reality were rapidly boosted. This also meant that the lone soldiers at the top of the warehouse and the steam chariot that was slowly approaching on its treads were the victors in this battle. To the lone army, this was a situation where their advantage was extremely amplified. Mamosi and the other Rose School of Thought demigod immediately reacted. One of them tried to possess the mummy, while the other attempted to pick up the eyeless doll. They planned on escaping before their strength decreased to a certain threshold. Of course, the lady with the evening gown and the golden-eyed demigod couldn't allow the enemy to do as they wished. But just as they were about to take action, a light streaked into the sky and exploded into dreamy fireworks. Right on the heels of that, the two demigods felt their spiritual perception trigger simultaneously as they looked into opposite directions. A hand wearing a transparent glove reached out from the void beside Tutenses Ai's golden sarcophagus, grabbing a handful of soil that was soaked with dark red liquid. The liquid was a mixture of Tutenses Ai's brain matter and bodily fluids. It was a ritualistic material used to maintain its spirituality, and the latter contained its blood. Mamosi and the Rose School of Thought demigod, who wielded the sealed artifact, also looked over, and they happened to see a figure wearing a formal suit and top hat appear. This figure was bending his back to pick up the soil soaked with dark red liquid. During this process, he kept his right hand to his left breast, as though he was bowing towards the demigods. Then, maintaining this pose, he looked up to reveal his metal gray masked face before rapidly fading away into nothingness.